I still remember that morning, even though more than 30 years have passed. Some memories fade with time, but not the ones that change your life forever. Some moments stay alive inside you, like a quiet ache that never completely goes away. People often tell me, "Mary, you lived a long life. You must have forgotten the painful things by now." And I usually smile, because it is easier than explaining the truth. You do not forget the day your whole world shifts beneath your feet. You only learn how to walk with the memory. Back then, I was not the old woman you see today. I was a young mother, full of hopes, fears, and quiet prayers. I believed family was strong. I believed love was enough. And I believed my mother would always be there, no matter how hard life became. But life teaches you lessons you never asked for. It was early autumn. The sun had just risen, coloring the sky a soft gold. I woke up expecting an ordinary day. I made coffee. I folded laundry. I thought my mother was still asleep in her room across the hall. I remember calling out to her, "Mom, breakfast is ready." But the silence that answered me felt different that morning. Too heavy. Too still. I walked toward her room, and with every step, something inside me tightened. A small voice whispered, "Something is wrong." Another voice said, "No, you're imagining it." But the air had a strange emptiness to it. When I opened her door, I saw her bed neatly made. Her favorite sweater was gone. Her walking shoes were missing. And on the pillow, there was a single folded note. My hands shook as I reached for it, not because I was afraid of what she wrote, but because deep down, I already knew she was gone. The note was short. Simple. Just a few lines written in her soft handwriting. "Mary, my dear. I am leaving. Please do not look for me. I love you more than you will ever know." That was all. No explanation. No goodbye hug. Just a quiet disappearance that tore a hole in my heart. That was the day my mother left home forever. And even though I was a grown woman, I felt like a scared child, standing alone in a world suddenly too big, too quiet, and too cold. I did not know it then, but this was only the beginning. The beginning of a story that shaped my life, my choices, and the woman I eventually became. After I found my mother's note that morning, I sat on the edge of her bed for a long time. My fingers kept tracing the writing, over and over, as if touching the letters would somehow bring her back. The room smelled like her, lavender soap and old books. It felt impossible that she could leave so quietly, so completely, without a sound or a single goodbye. But before I tell you what happened afterward, I should tell you what our lives looked like before that day. Because stories like these do not begin with a single moment. They grow from years of small things, quiet worries, silent burdens, unspoken feelings. My mother's name was Evelyn Grace Carter, though most people just called her Evelyn. She was a gentle woman with a soft voice and eyes that always seemed to understand more than she said. When I was young, she was the kind of mother who tucked my hair behind my ear when I cried. Who held my hand through storms. Who stayed up late sewing dresses when we could not afford store-bought ones. Everyone told me I was lucky to have her. And they were right. We lived in a small town in Ohio, in a simple white house with a porch that creaked when you stepped on the left side. My husband, Thomas, worked at the local hardware store back then. He was a quiet man, steady and predictable, the kind of person who spoke more with actions than with words. He was never unkind, just reserved, practical, and sometimes too focused on paying bills to notice the emotional storms in the house. We had one son at that time, Michael, who was only 7 years old. He had his grandmother's eyes, bright and full of curiosity. He adored her. Every morning before school, he would run into her room to show her whatever small treasure he found, a feather, a shiny rock, a drawing he made. And Evelyn always looked at him as if he had just brought her the most wonderful gift on earth. Life wasn't perfect, but it was simple. Peaceful in its own way. Still, there were signs. Small cracks in the calm, the kind you only recognize later. My mother had always been strong, physically, emotionally, spiritually. But around the time Michael turned 6, she began to slow down. At first it was little things, forgetting where she placed her glasses, needing to rest more often, staring out the window longer than usual. I assumed it was just age. But sometimes I caught her looking at me with a strange sadness, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the right words. One evening, I asked her gently, "Mom, is everything okay?" She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, dear. I'm just tired. That's all." And I believed her. Or maybe I wanted to believe her. Looking back now, I realize how many opportunities one had to ask more questions. To sit with her. To listen better. But life was busy. Thomas and I were trying to save money. Michael was growing fast and always needed something: shoes, books, attention, love. And so, slowly, quietly, my mother drifted into her own world. She spent more time outside, sitting on the porch even in the cold months. Sometimes I found her staring at the sunset with a strange, faraway look. When I asked what she was thinking about, she would answer softly, "Oh, just remembering." But she never explained what those memories were. One afternoon, I came home from the grocery store and found her packing old letters into a wooden box. She looked startled when I walked in, like a child caught doing something secret. I asked her what the letters were, and her voice trembled a little as she said, "Just old things, Mary. Things I should have sorted long ago." I didn't push. I trusted her. I thought if she needed to tell me anything, she would. But that's the thing about the people we love. We assume they will always share their hearts with us. We forget they are human too, with fears they sometimes hide. Around that time, Thomas began working longer hours. Money was tight, and with Michael growing, the expenses were adding up. I took on more responsibilities at home, and naturally, I leaned on my mother the way I always had. She helped where she could. But I noticed she struggled more each day. Some nights I heard her walking the house quietly, as if unable to sleep. Other nights I heard her crying in her room, very softly, as if she didn't want anyone to hear. I wish I had gone to her on those nights. I wish I had knocked on her door and held her hand and said, "Mom, you are not alone." But I didn't. And I still carry that regret. Looking back, the warning signs were there. The moments when she paused too long before answering a simple question. The days she forgot she had already brewed coffee. The way she sometimes stared at Michael as if trying to memorize him. But life moves fast. Too fast. And sometimes love makes us blind to the pain in front of us. So when that morning came. The morning I found her note and saw her shoes missing. It felt shocking, heartbreaking, unbelievable. But now, as an old woman looking back, I can see how her journey toward that moment had begun long before the sunrise of that autumn day. In the weeks before she left, I began to feel something shifting in the house. It was subtle, like a change in the air before a storm. Nothing loud. Nothing dramatic. Just a quiet heaviness, a silence that carried more weight than words ever could. My mother started waking earlier than usual. Sometimes, when I came downstairs at dawn, I found her sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea in her hands. The tea was usually cold, untouched. She would smile when she saw me, but the smile felt borrowed, like something she put on for my sake. "Couldn't sleep?" I would ask gently. "No, dear," she would say, her voice soft and calm. "I just wanted to see the morning light." At the time, I thought it was something harmless. Maybe she simply enjoyed quiet mornings. Maybe she was just getting older and sleeping less, the way many elders do. I didn't know she was preparing herself for a goodbye. You see, when you live with someone every day, you don't always notice the slow changes. You don't see how their steps become softer, how their breaths become heavier, how their thoughts drift further away from the present. It happens slowly. So slowly you think nothing is changing at all. Around that time, she also started avoiding certain rooms. She barely stepped into the living room anymore, even though it used to be her favorite place to read. She no longer played the old piano by the window. She stopped calling her friends from church. Every time the phone rang, she looked startled, almost frightened. I remember asking her one afternoon, "Mom, why don't you invite Ruth or Diane over? You haven't seen them in weeks." Her hands froze in the middle of folding laundry. She stared down at a towel and whispered, "I don't want them to see me like this." "Like what?" I asked, confused. But she only shook her head and forced a smile. "Like an old woman who forgets too much." That was the first time I felt a real uneasiness in my chest. The first time I wondered whether something deeper was happening inside her mind. But she didn't say more. And I didn't push. I keep thinking about that moment, even now, 30 years later. Because sometimes the things left unsaid hurt more than the things spoken aloud. Michael, being young and innocent, sensed the change in his own way. He started bringing her more drawings, more flowers picked from the yard. More little treasures he hoped would cheer her up. "Grandma looks sad," he told me one night as I tucked him into bed. "She doesn't smile the same." Children notice things adults overlook. Their hearts are closer to truth. I kissed his forehead and said, "She's just tired, sweetheart. She'll be okay." But even then, a small voice inside me whispered, "Will she?" Thomas did not see the changes the way we did. He worked long hours and came home exhausted. To him, my mother was simply aging. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. One evening, after I mentioned my concerns, he put his arm around me and said, "Mary, your mother is getting older. That's all. Try not to worry too much." I nodded because it was easier than explaining the heaviness sitting inside my chest. But I knew something wasn't right. People often assume the world breaks in loud ways. Shouts, arguments, slammed doors. But sometimes homes break in silence. Quietly. Softly. Without anyone noticing until the day everything changes. There were moments when I caught her packing things. Small items, old photographs, letters, trinkets she had kept for decades. When I asked why, she would shrug and say, "Oh, I'm just organizing. These things take space." But I saw the way her hands shook. I saw the way her eyes filled with memories she never shared. One night, I heard her speaking softly in her room. At first, I thought she was on the phone. But when I walked past her door, I realized she was talking to herself. She sat on the edge of her bed, holding an old picture of my father. He had passed away many years earlier, leaving her a widow at a fairly young age. She whispered to the picture, "I miss you. I'm tired. I want to come home." I stood there, frozen. My heart hurt for her. But something inside me felt afraid too. Afraid that she was sinking into a place I couldn't reach. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. She made breakfast. She braided Michael's hair the way she sometimes did for fun. She hummed an old tune as she worked. But her eyes carried a faraway sadness. The last memory before she left, the one that plays in my mind even now, happened 3 days before the note appeared. She was sitting on the porch, watching the sky turn orange and pink. I brought her a blanket because the air was chilly. She took my hand in hers. Her grip was warm but trembling slightly. "Mary," she said in a soft, thoughtful voice. "You've grown into such a strong woman." I smiled, a little embarrassed. "Oh, Mom. I'm strong because you raised me." She looked at me then, really looked at me. With eyes full of love and something else, something like sorrow. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something important. Something heavy. But instead, she closed her lips and let out a quiet sigh. "Never forget who you are," she whispered. "And never blame yourself for the choices others make." I didn't understand her words then. They felt random, almost confusing. But now I see they were her goodbye. Her last gift. Her last warning. Her last piece of wisdom before she stepped out of our lives and into the unknown. 3 days later, she was gone. And the note she left behind was all that remained. When I look back now, I realize that the days following my mother's disappearance were the beginning of a long, painful unraveling. Grief does not always arrive with tears. Sometimes it comes quietly, sitting beside you at the dinner table, following you into every room, whispering doubts you try your best to ignore. After I found the note, the first thing I felt was disbelief. I kept expecting her to walk through the door, holding a bag of groceries or carrying one of her old knitting projects. I imagined her saying with a gentle laugh, "Oh Mary, I just needed a little break. You worry too much." But the hours passed. Then the day ended. Then another began. And she didn't come home. Thomas tried to console me the best he could. He put his hands on my shoulders and said, "She's probably staying with a friend. Maybe she just needed some time alone." Time alone. The phrase repeated in my mind like an echo. But my mother wasn't the type to leave without a word. Not unless something inside her had grown too heavy, too painful to carry anymore. I called her closest friends, Ruth and Diane. Neither of them had seen her. Neither of them knew she was planning anything. Evelyn left. Ruth asked, shocked. "She didn't tell me a thing, dear." Not a hint. Diane's voice trembled on the phone. "Oh sweetheart, are you sure she's all right?" I wasn't sure of anything. I checked the bus station, the church, the little library she loved. No one had seen her. It was as if she simply vanished. But the world does not stop when your heart breaks. There were meals to cook, clothes to wash, a child to raise, a husband working long hours. Life kept moving forward, pulling me along with it, even though all I wanted was to sit still and search for the pieces of my mother's life she left behind. Michael asked for her every night. "When is Grandma coming back?" he would say, his small voice hopeful. I tried to answer gently. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. But she loves you very much." He would nod, but his eyes always filled with confusion. Children don't understand the quiet disappearances adults carry out of fear, illness, or pain. Meanwhile, I carried responsibility the way a tired person carries a heavy box, steady on the outside, but trembling inside. A few days after her disappearance, I went into her room for the first time since finding the note. The sunlight fell across her bed in a soft, golden line. Everything was exactly as she left it, her books stacked neatly, her rosary resting on the nightstand, her favorite blue cardigan folded with care. On her dresser, I found a small envelope with my name on it. It wasn't sealed. Just placed there, quietly waiting. Inside was a faded photograph of the three of us, me, her, and my father. I was just a little girl then, smiling with my 2 front teeth missing. On the back, in her handwriting, she had written, "You were my greatest joy, Mary. Never doubt that." I pressed the photograph to my chest and cried for the first time since she left. Not loud, not messy. Just soft tears that fell like gentle rain, the kind you don't notice until the ground beneath you is wet. But even grief wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was the doubt. I kept wondering. Did I miss something? Was she suffering more than she let on? Was there something I could have done? These questions became part of my days, whispering in the background. Around this time, our home began to feel different. Not just because of her absence, but because of how each of us reacted to it. Thomas became quieter. He didn't know how to comfort me, and I didn't know how to ask for comfort. At night we lay in bed, two people side by side, both hurting but unsure how to bridge the space between us. Michael grew clingier. He followed me everywhere, even when I folded laundry, even when I cooked. "Don't leave like Grandma," he whispered once, clutching my hand. My heart cracked at his words. I knelt down and hugged him tightly. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. I promise." But even as I said it, I wondered what my mother was doing at that very moment. Was she safe? Was she warm? Was she scared or relieved? The not knowing was torture. A week after she left, I visited our family doctor, Dr. Harris, hoping he might offer some insight. He had known my mother for years. When I told him what happened, he sighed softly, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Mary, your mother's memory had been declining for a while. She was aware of it, probably more than any of us." I swallowed hard. I knew she was forgetting things, but I didn't think. "People handle such changes differently," he said gently. "Some fight it. Some deny it. And some try to spare their loved ones." "Spare us?" I whispered. He nodded. "She may have believed leaving was kinder than staying and letting you watch her decline." The idea felt like a knife twisting inside me. My own mother, trying to protect us by disappearing. "But she didn't need to protect us," I said, tears burning behind my eyes. "We would have taken care of her. I would have taken care of her." "I know," he replied softly. And maybe, deep down, she knew too. But fear makes people choose paths they otherwise wouldn't. I left the clinic feeling heavier than before. As I drove home, the autumn leaves swirled around the road like a quiet storm. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt familiar anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking of her. Wondering where she slept. What she ate. Whether she was alone or had found someone kind enough to help her. And then I remembered something. Her room had been too clean. Too organized. My mother rarely left things so neatly unless she was preparing for something. The realization struck me with an ache so deep I had to sit down. She had planned this. Not impulsively. Not in fear. But with intention. She didn't walk out because she was angry or confused. She walked out because she believed it was the best thing she could do. For us. For herself. But even knowing that didn't soften the hurt. As the days turned into weeks, a quiet tension settled into our home. Not loud. Not spoken. Just a steady pressure beneath everything, like a low hum you only notice when the room falls silent. Every morning, I checked the mailbox, hoping for a letter from her. A sign. A clue. Anything. But there was nothing. I started calling places farther away, senior centers, shelters, small clinics in nearby towns. Every time I dialed, my heart tightened with both hope and dread. "No, ma'am, we haven't seen anyone by that name." "No, sorry. No Evelyn Carter here." "I'll keep your number, but it doesn't ring a bell." Every call felt like a door closing. Thomas tried to help when he could, but he wasn't wired for emotional storms. One evening, when I was sorting through my mother's belongings for the 100th time, he said softly, "Mary, you need to rest." I turned to him, exhausted. How can I rest when she's out there somewhere? Alone? He let out a slow breath, rubbed his forehead, and said, "I'm worried about you. You haven't slept properly in days." I knew he meant well. I knew he was trying. But grief doesn't respond to logic or gentle reminders. Grief has its own voice, its own pace. And mine was loud. Michael's confusion. Michael, meanwhile, continued to ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. "Mom, what if Grandma got lost? What if she's cold? Why didn't she take me with her? Did I do something wrong?" Every question felt like a fresh wound. I hugged him close one night and said, "Sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. Grandma loves you more than anything." "But why did she leave?" he whispered. I paused, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I didn't want to lie. "Sometimes grown-ups get scared," I said softly. "And sometimes, they don't know how to ask for help." He nodded, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. Children try so hard to understand the things adults struggle to explain. A new strain on our marriage. As the weight of her disappearance grew heavier, the strain between Thomas and me deepened. He wanted to protect me from drowning in sorrow, but he didn't know how. And I didn't know how to let him in. One night, we sat at the dinner table eating in silence. The chair where my mother always sat felt painfully empty. Finally, Thomas said, "Mary, we need to talk." I looked up, my fork frozen in midair. His voice wasn't harsh. It wasn't angry. Just tired. "You've stopped taking care of yourself," he said. "You barely eat. You barely sleep. I'm worried." "I'm fine," I whispered. "You're not," he replied gently. "And I can't help you if you won't talk to me." But talking felt impossible. Because every sentence would unravel into grief. So I shook my head, and he sighed, a deep sigh that told me he felt helpless. That night, we lay in bed with our backs turned toward each other. Both awake, both hurting, both pretending to be asleep. Silence can be loud when two hearts drift apart. Finding the hidden box. A turning point in that long season of searching happened one cold afternoon while I was cleaning her closet. Behind her clothes, on the top shelf, hidden under an old quilt, I found a wooden box I didn't recognize. It was small, carved with tiny flowers, delicate, beautiful, and definitely old. Inside, I found a stack of letters tied with a thin ribbon. A few faded photographs. A small silver locket. And a train ticket stub from nearly 40 years earlier. My breath caught in my throat. The letters were addressed to my mother. But they weren't signed by my father. They were signed by someone named Samuel Reed. I felt a strange stillness wash over me. Samuel Reed. A name I had never heard. My hands trembled as I unfolded the first letter. "My dearest Evelyn. I hope life has been gentle to you. I still think of you every spring." I stopped reading, my chest tightening. These were love letters. Letters from a man who clearly cared deeply for her. But my mother had never mentioned him. Not once. Not ever. The photographs told another story. My mother standing beside a tall man with kind eyes. Both smiling. Both young. A life she lived before me. A chapter she never shared. As I held the locket, I opened it with a gentle push. Inside were two tiny pictures. My mother. And the man from the photographs. I sank to the floor, stunned. My mother had a past I knew nothing about. A love before my father. A life before the one she built with us. Why had she hidden it? Why had she kept these memories locked away? And why did she leave now, after all these years? Questions swirled around me, thick and heavy. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after everyone else went to bed. The letters lay in front of me, their words filled with nostalgia and longing. The name Samuel repeated in my mind. Had she gone to find him? Was he still alive? Did she think of him all these years? Did losing her memory bring back the longing for a time when life felt simple? I didn't know. But I did know this. My mother didn't leave on impulse. She left following something. A memory. A regret. A hope. Or a goodbye she never got to say. The breaking point. The next morning, I decided to tell Thomas about the letters. He listened quietly as I showed him the box. He didn't judge. He didn't react with jealousy or confusion. He simply said, "Mary, your mother was carrying a burden alone. And maybe she left because she didn't want you to carry it with her." His words were gentle. Wise. Painful. But they didn't ease the ache. For the first time, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief for her leaving. Anger for her secrets. Fear for what might have happened to her. And guilt for not understanding sooner. That day marked the beginning of a shift in me. Something inside broke open. Not in a dramatic way. Just a quiet cracking, like old wood under pressure. I realized something important. I wasn't just searching for my mother anymore. I was searching for the truth she left behind. The day everything changed. The day I finally understood more about my mother's disappearance. Did not arrive with lightning or loud revelations. It came quietly, with a phone call I almost didn't answer. It was late November, nearly 2 months after she left. The weather had turned cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. I was making dinner, stirring a pot of soup that barely simmered, my mind far away as usual. The phone rang. For a moment, I considered letting it ring. The house felt heavy, and my heart was tired. But something, some small instinct, told me to pick it up. "Hello?" I said softly. A woman's voice answered. "Is this Mary Carter?" "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Linda Reed." The surname alone sent a jolt down my spine. Reed. Samuel Reed. My mother's letters. My breath caught, but the woman continued gently, as if sensing my fear. "I'm Samuel's daughter," she said. "I'm calling about your mother, Evelyn." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I clutched the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Is she all right?" I whispered. Linda let out a slow exhale. "She's safe. She's with us." The world tilted beneath me. Safe. The word felt unreal, almost fragile. I sank into the nearest chair, tears blurring my vision. Where is she?" "She's staying at my father's home," Linda said quietly. "He found her wandering near the old train station outside his town." She was confused. Cold. She didn't seem to remember much, except his name. I pressed my hand to my mouth. My mother remembered Samuel. Even when she forgot so many other things. Linda continued, her tone warm, understanding. "My father recognized her right away. They were very close, many years ago. He brought her home and cared for her, but it's clear she belongs with family. He asked me to call you." My heart hurt with a mix of relief and sorrow. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for finding her. Thank you for calling." Linda's voice softened. "She kept saying your name, Mary. Over and over. She said she didn't want to be a burden to you." Those words broke something inside me. Burden. She left because she thought she was a burden. I closed my eyes, swallowing the ache. "Can I speak to her?" I asked. Linda hesitated. "She's resting now, but I can arrange a visit. We're about 3 hours from you." 3 hours. So close, yet she had felt so far away. We made plans for the following morning. When I hung up the phone, I sat in silence, letting the truth wash over me. My mother was alive. Safe. With someone from her past she trusted, maybe even loved. The letters. The locket. The hidden memories. It all began to make sense in a painful, bittersweet way. Thomas came into the kitchen just as I wiped my eyes. "What happened?" he asked gently. She's alive," I whispered, my voice trembling. "She's with Samuel." He nodded slowly, absorbing the name. The name tied to the letters, the photographs, the piece of her life I never knew. He sat beside me, taking my hand. "So we know where she is," he said softly. "That's what matters." I nodded, though a new fear crept into my heart. What would I find when I saw her? Would she know me? Would she remember the home she left behind? Or would she be lost in a world where only the past remained? The drive to Samuel's home. The next morning, we left early, Thomas, Michael, and I. The road stretched long and quiet, lined with bare trees reaching toward a cold, gray sky. Michael sat in the back seat, hugging his stuffed bear. "Will Grandma come home with us?" he asked. "I hope so, sweetheart," I said. "We'll see her soon." But hope can be a fragile thing. When we finally reached the small town where Samuel lived, Linda met us outside a modest brick house with a white porch. She was warm, kind, and carried a sadness in her eyes that told me she understood more than she said. "Thank you for coming," she said gently. Where is she?" I asked. "She's inside. She's having a good morning today. That doesn't always happen." Her words tightened my chest. Good morning today. Meaning some days were not good. Meaning her mind drifted often. Linda led us into a cozy living room filled with bookshelves, soft lighting, and an old piano in the corner. And there, sitting in a cushioned chair by the window, was my mother. Evelyn. Her gray hair was pulled back gently. A blanket covered her lap. She stared out the window at the winter landscape, her expression calm but distant. "Mom?" I whispered. She turned. Her eyes, those familiar, gentle eyes, blinked slowly, searching my face. For a long moment, there was no recognition. Just confusion. And then, suddenly, "Mary," she breathed. My heart broke and healed in the same second. "Yes, Mom," I whispered, rushing to her side and taking her hands. "I'm here. I'm right here." Her lips trembled. "Oh, Mary. I didn't want you to see me like this." Tears filled my eyes. "You're my mother," I whispered. "I want to see you. I want to be with you." She looked down, ashamed. "I was forgetting things, important things. I didn't want you to carry the burden." I shook my head fiercely. "You don't get to decide that alone. We carry each other. That's what family is." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I thought I was sparing you. But I only caused more pain." I embraced her gently, holding her fragile frame against mine. "You're home now," I whispered. "You're safe." But as she leaned into me, I felt how thin she had become. How tired. How much of her had already drifted away. And I knew. She was not the same woman who had raised me. Her mind had begun its quiet departure long before she physically walked away. Meeting Samuel. When my mother rested, Linda introduced us to her father, Samuel. He walked into the room quietly, leaning on a cane. Despite his age, there was something strong and steady about him. A gentleness in his eyes, a softness in his voice. The kind of presence that made you feel safe. "You must be Mary," he said warmly. "Yes," I said, standing. "Thank you for taking care of her." "Truly." He shook his head softly. "I only did what anyone would do for someone they once loved." The honesty in his words struck me deeply. "I didn't know about you," I whispered. He smiled gently, a nostalgic smile. "There's a lot you didn't know, child. Life takes turns we don't expect. Your mother and I, well, that was a different time." I nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and sorrow. "She kept your letters," I said. He looked down, blinking back emotion. "I kept hers too." In that moment, I understood that love doesn't always end. Sometimes it simply changes its shape. Fitting into memories, into hidden boxes, into quiet corners of the heart. Samuel placed his hand on mine. "She needs her family now," he said softly. "If you're ready to bring her home." "I think she's ready to go." Bringing my mother home was not a single moment. It was a slow, careful process. One wrapped in fragile hope, quiet fear, and the realization that life does not return to what it once was. It only moves forward, whether our hearts are ready or not. The day we brought her back from Samuel's home, the sky was gray and quiet. Her hands trembled in mine as we helped her into the car. Michael sat beside her in the back seat, holding her hand gently, as if afraid she might disappear again. "Grandma, are you coming home forever?" he asked softly. My mother smiled, but the smile was faint, like a memory fading. I think so, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'm tired of walking." Those words lingered in the car. Simple, soft, honest. Tired of walking. Tired of running from memories. Tired of pretending she was fine. Tired of carrying the burden alone. As we drove away from Samuel's home, I looked back once more. He stood on the porch, hand raised, watching us with quiet emotion. A chapter closing. A quiet goodbye between two people who once loved each other deeply, and who now understood the past could not be reclaimed. Linda stood beside him, her arm wrapped around his. Their presence felt like a gentle blessing, like they were giving my mother back to us with care. When we reached home, I led my mother inside slowly. Everything looked familiar, yet I could feel how foreign it must have seemed to her in that moment. She paused in the living room, her eyes scanning the walls, the furniture, the old piano she had abandoned years earlier. "It feels different," she said quietly. "Nothing has changed," I whispered back. She touched the back of a chair and shook her head. "No, Mary. I'm the one who's changed." I swallowed a wave of emotion. Thomas helped her to her room, adjusting pillows, opening the curtains to let in soft daylight. He was kinder than I had seen him in months, gentle, patient, aware of the gravity of the moment. "Thank you," I told him as he stepped out of her room. He simply nodded. "We'll get through this," he said, though his eyes carried worry. Her first night home. That first night, I stayed awake listening for her. Every small sound made me sit up in bed. A creak in the hallway. A soft step. The turning of a doorknob. But the house remained still. Around midnight, I quietly opened her door. She was awake, sitting up in bed, staring at the moonlight filtering through the curtains. "Can't sleep?" I asked softly. She looked at me with tired eyes. "I'm afraid," she whispered. I sat beside her, taking her fragile hand. "Of what?" "Of forgetting everything," she said. "Forgetting you, forgetting Michael, forgetting who I am." Her voice trembled, and I felt my chest tighten painfully. "You won't forget us," I whispered. But she shook her head. "I already lose pieces of myself, Mary," she said. "Sometimes I wake up and don't remember what day it is. Sometimes I forget why I walked into a room. Sometimes I forget the sound of your father's laugh. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I don't want to disappear, slowly, piece by piece. I wrapped my arms around her gently. We will walk this together, I whispered. You're not alone. But even as I said the words, I feared the truth she already knew. The visit to the clinic. A week later, I took her to see Dr. Harris. She clung to my arm as we walked through the clinic hallway, her steps slow, careful. Dr. Harris greeted her with warmth. Evelyn, it's good to see you safe. My mother smiled weakly. I'm sorry for worrying everyone. He examined her gently, checking her memory, her reflexes, her responses. Afterward, he pulled me aside. Mary. I believe she's in the early stages of dementia. I expected the words, yet hearing them still felt like being hit by a wave. Is it going to get worse? I whispered. He sighed softly. Dementia is progressive. It can be slow or rapid, depending on the person. But one thing is certain, she will need patience, structure, and support. I nodded, though the room felt strangely small. Is it my fault? I asked before I could stop myself. Did I miss something? Did I? He interrupted gently. It's not your fault, he said. And it's not hers either. Her leaving wasn't an act of selfishness. It was fear. People facing memory loss sometimes run from the people they love most. I wiped my eyes. I wish she told me. She didn't want you to see her decline, he said. Some people would rather disappear than feel like a burden. Those words stung deeply. Burden. There it was again. The word that had haunted every choice she made. Adjusting to the new normal. The next several weeks were filled with adjustments. Some days were good, days when she remembered small details, days when she laughed with Michael, days when she hummed old songs from her childhood. Other days were harder. There were mornings when she didn't recognize our house. Afternoons when she became frightened because she misplaced something simple, like her glasses. Nights when she cried quietly, whispering. I'm slipping, Mary. I'm slipping away. I reassured her every time, even when my heart felt like it was breaking. Thomas became more present. He helped with chores, cooked meals, and tried to give me moments of rest. But the strain was real. Some evenings, after my mother finally fell asleep, I cried alone in the bathroom. Silent tears, careful sobs, the kind that feel like you're losing pieces of yourself too. Michael, sweet and innocent, made drawings for her every day. He taped them to her wall so she could see them when she woke. One morning, she touched a drawing of a family holding hands and whispered. I don't deserve this much love. Yes, you do, I told her firmly. Every bit of it. A painful discovery. One afternoon, while my mother napped, I received a small envelope in the mail addressed to me. There was no return address. Inside was a letter written in Samuel's shaky handwriting. Dear Mary. Your mother spoke of you often while she stayed with us. She wanted you to know she left not because of a lack of love, but because she wanted to spare you the burden she thought she would become. Please tell her she was never a burden to me, nor to anyone who ever loved her. I pressed the letter to my chest, tears falling freely. He ended with. I kept her safe when she needed it. Now it is your turn. Take care of her the way she took care of you. It was the closest thing to a blessing he could give. And in that moment, I understood something important. My mother leaving was not an ending. It was a turning point. For her. For me. For all of us. She had run from fear. I would run toward love. The weeks after my mother returned home were some of the most emotional days of my life. Not because everything suddenly got better, but because life finally settled into a rhythm. A fragile, tender rhythm built on acceptance rather than fear. For the first time, I understood that healing is not a dramatic event. It is quiet. It is slow. It happens in small, unexpected moments. Like when someone remembers your name after forgetting it the day before. Or when a house once filled with sorrow begins to sound like a home again. Every morning, my mother and I sat together in the kitchen, drinking tea. Some days she seemed fully present, asking about Michael's school or reminding me to water the houseplants. Other days she stared at her cup with a distant sadness, as though she were listening to memories that only she could hear. But even on the hard days, she wasn't running anymore. She stayed. She tried. And that, to me, was a kind of victory. Choosing patience. I had to learn patience in a way I never had before. My mother repeated herself often, forgetting conversations we'd had mere hours earlier. "Mary, did we call Ruth today?" "Yes, Mom, we called her this morning." "Did I eat lunch?" "Yes, Mom." "You did." "Where is the blue sweater your father bought me?" "Right here, Mom." "I folded it on your chair." Sometimes she grew frustrated with herself. Sometimes she cried quietly. But I always told her the same thing. "It's all right. You're safe. I'm here." I said those words so many times they became a mantra. Not just for her. But for me, too. Because caring for someone who is slowly changing is not easy. It tests your heart. It tests your patience. It teaches you that love is not always soft or simple. Sometimes love is holding someone through confusion. Supporting them through fear. And reminding them they matter even when they feel lost inside their own mind. Thomas and I grow closer again. For a long time, the burden had pushed Thomas and me apart. But slowly, almost quietly, it brought us back together. One evening, after a particularly long day, I sat at the table exhausted. My mother had had a confusing afternoon, mixing up names, misplacing objects, and crying over memories she could not fully recall. Thomas came up behind me and rested his hands on my shoulders. "You're carrying so much," he said gently. "Let me help." I didn't realize I was crying until he wiped a tear from my cheek. "I don't want to lose her," I whispered. "You're not losing her," he said softly. "You're giving her a soft place to land." His words eased something inside me. For the first time in months, we talked openly. About fear. About responsibility. About how much we loved each other even when everything around us felt heavy. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept beside him with a sense of comfort. And I realized that grief doesn't always break marriages. Sometimes, it tests them. And if you're lucky, strengthens them. Michael's understanding. Children understand more than we think. Michael adjusted to his grandmother's new reality with a gentleness far beyond his young age. He would sit with her after school, telling her stories about his day even when she didn't fully follow. "Grandma, today I helped a friend tie his shoe." "Oh, that's lovely, sweetheart," she would say, smiling warmly. One afternoon, I found them sitting on the rug together. He was showing her how to put together a small puzzle. "See, Grandma. It's okay if you forget where the pieces go," he said in a soft, patient voice. "We can do it together." She looked at him with tears shining in her eyes. "You're such a sweet boy." He smiled proudly. Moments like those reminded me that love doesn't always need clear memory. Sometimes it just needs presence. The letters and the locket. One evening, after dinner, my mother sat with me in the living room. She held the silver locket I had found in her hidden box the month before. Her fingers traced its edges slowly. "This was from Samuel," she said, her voice trembling. I looked at her gently. "You remember?" She nodded. Not everything, pieces. His kindness. His smile. The way he made me feel when your father died. Her eyes drifted toward the window, where the last light of day was fading. He loved me once. And I loved him. But life took us in different directions. Her voice softened with regret. When my memory started slipping, I wanted to go somewhere that felt familiar. Somewhere I was happy once. Tears filled her eyes. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want you to see me fall apart. I wrapped my arm around her. You don't have to hide from me, I whispered. I'm your daughter. I want all of you, the good days, the bad days, the memories, even the forgotten ones. She leaned against me, fragile and warm. I'm sorry, Mary. For leaving. For hurting you. For making you search. I kissed her forehead. You're here now, I said softly. That's what matters. A scary night. But healing is never linear. One cold night in December, just as the first snow began to fall, something happened that reminded me how delicate everything truly was. I woke up to the sound of the front door opening. Heart pounding, I rushed downstairs. There she was. Standing on the porch in her nightgown, barefoot, staring out into the falling snow. Mom! I cried, running toward her. What are you doing? It's freezing. She turned slowly, her eyes distant and afraid. I was looking for home, she whispered. This is home, I said, voice shaking as I wrapped my coat around her shoulders. You're home with me. But she shook her head. I got confused. The house, it didn't feel right. Her teeth chattered. Her hands trembled. I took her inside, warmed her, held her trembling body until her breathing steadied. And for the first time, I realized. No matter how much I loved her. No matter how patient I tried to be. Dementia had a way of slipping through cracks you didn't even know existed. That night, after she finally fell asleep, I sat alone in the living room, crying silently. Because love can guide someone through the darkness. But love cannot always stop the darkness from coming. Reaching out for help. The next morning, I called Dr. Harris. I can't do this alone, I admitted through tears. I want to, but I'm scared. He spoke gently, kindly. You're not alone, Mary. There are support groups. Care programs. Home aides who can help. You don't have to carry all of this by yourself. He gave me numbers to call. He gave me hope I didn't know I needed. And slowly, I learned to reach out. Something I had never been good at. A home nurse named Helen began visiting twice a week. She was warm, patient, and experienced with dementia care. She helped me understand my mother better. How to redirect her when she was confused. How to comfort her during memory lapses. How to create routines that felt safe. With Helen's help, the days grew calmer. Not easier. But calmer. With Helen's help and the new routines we built, the house began to feel steadier again. Not like before. Not the old familiar life we once had. But something gentler, quieter, held together with patience and a kind of love that grows only in hardship. My mother responded to routine more than anything else. Morning tea at the same time. Her favorite chair by the window. Light classical music playing softly in the afternoon. A walk around the backyard when the weather allowed. These small patterns anchored her, helped her feel safe. And slowly, I realized something beautiful. Even when memory fades, love does not. She may not have remembered every detail. But she remembered how to smile when Michael hugged her. She remembered the comfort of my hand holding hers. She remembered songs from her childhood that she hummed softly in the evenings. Memory is not only stored in the mind. Sometimes it lives in the heart. Letting go of what I could not control. One afternoon, after a particularly calm day, I sat on the porch while she napped. The winter sun rested low in the sky, casting a soft golden light across the yard. Thomas joined me, sitting down with a gentle sigh. "You've been doing so much," he said, his voice warm. "I'm proud of you." I shook my head. "I haven't done anything special. I'm just doing what anyone would do." "Not everyone would do this," he said. "Not with the patience you've shown. Not with the grace." I looked down, feeling tears sting my eyes. "I keep wishing I could have stopped her from leaving," I whispered. "Maybe if I had noticed sooner, she never would have run." Thomas took my hand. "You can't change the past," he said softly. "But you're changing her present. And that matters more." I leaned my head against his shoulder, letting the weight inside me soften. For months, I had been carrying guilt like a shadow. But his words reminded me that guilt serves no purpose. Love does. A return to faith. My mother had always loved Sunday church services. She said it made her feel grounded, part of something bigger. So one Sunday, after weeks of small improvements, I decided to take her to church again. She wore her blue cardigan. The one my father had given her many years ago. The one she kept asking about. When we walked inside, the congregation gasped softly. People stood, greeted her with warm embraces, whispered prayers, gentle welcomes. "Evelyn, you're a sight for sore eyes. We missed you, dear. You look beautiful." She smiled shyly, overwhelmed by the kindness. During the service, she held my hand tightly, her thumb brushing the back of my hand the way she used to do when I was a child. When the choir began singing "Amazing Grace," she closed her eyes. And then, in the softest voice, she sang along. Word for word. Her voice trembled, but the melody was unmistakably hers. A voice from the past. A voice I feared I'd never hear again. Tears rolled down my cheeks. I wasn't the only one crying. Even the pastor paused for a moment, touched by the sound. For those few minutes, she wasn't a woman battling memory loss. She was my mother again. The mother who had sung me to sleep. Who held my hand through storms. Who taught me strength by living it quietly every day. After church, she whispered to me. "That felt familiar." "Yes," I said softly. It was. It was the first time since she returned that I felt hope not as a fragile dream, but as something real. The letter she tried to write. A few days later, I found my mother at the kitchen table, holding a pen in her shaky hand. A blank sheet of paper lay in front of her. "Are you writing something?" I asked. She nodded. I'm trying." I sat beside her as she pressed the pen against the paper. Her hand trembled. The letters came out uneven, scattered across the page. "My dear Mary." She wrote slowly. She stopped. Stared. Tried again. "I'm sorry I left. Her handwriting broke off, the pen slipping slightly. She sighed. A deep, weary sigh. "I can't remember the words," she whispered. I placed my hand over hers. "You don't have to," I said softly. "I know." She looked at me, tears filling her eyes. "Do you?" she asked. "Yes," I whispered. "I know everything you can't say." She leaned her forehead against mine. "Thank you," she murmured. "For loving me even when I make it hard." "You never make it hard," I said. "Life makes it hard. But you make it worth it." She began crying softly. Not out of fear, but relief. And I realized something important. She had been trying to apologize in 100 little ways. Ever since she returned. But she didn't need to. Her presence was apology enough. Her effort was apology enough. Her love, fragile, fading, but still real, was apology enough. Christmas Eve, a memory returns. As Christmas approached, the cold deepened. We decorated the house together, though she grew tired easily. Michael hung ornaments on the lower branches of the tree, while Thomas placed the star on top. My mother sat nearby, watching with a soft smile. On Christmas Eve, something surprising happened. We were sitting around the fireplace when she suddenly looked up at me with clarity in her eyes I hadn't seen in months. "Do you remember?" she began slowly. "The Christmas after your father died?" I froze. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were focused. She remembered. "You were 12, she continued. "You cried for days because you thought Christmas would never feel happy again." I nodded, tears forming. "I remember." She reached out and took my hand. "But we made hot cocoa," she said. "And we sang together, and by the end of the night, you smiled again." A tear slid down her cheek. "I promised that I would never leave you alone," she whispered. My breath caught. "And I broke that promise." I squeezed her hand gently. "You didn't break it," I said softly. "You were hurting. You were scared. And you came back." She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the fire wash over her face. "I love you, Mary," she whispered. "I always have." "I love you too," I said, my voice trembling. "Always." Michael climbed into her lap, wrapping his small arms around her. "You're the best grandma," he whispered. A faint laugh escaped her. "Oh, sweetheart. I'm just trying. That's all anyone has to do," he said innocently. We all smiled. And in that moment, in the soft glow of the fire, with snow falling quietly outside, with 3 generations gathered close, I felt peace. Real peace. Not the fragile kind that breaks easily, but a deep, steady warmth that comes from knowing you've done everything you could. That love has carried you through the darkest days. And that even broken moments can shine. 30 years have passed since that winter, but some memories still feel close. Close enough to touch, close enough to breathe in, like the warm scent of a home-cooked meal you never quite forget. People often ask me how I found the strength to take care of my mother during those years. They think strength is loud, bold, powerful. But the truth is, my strength was quiet. It lived in small moments. In the gentle way I held her hand when she was frightened. In the soft reminders of her name. In the way I tucked her into bed at night and whispered, "You're safe. I'm here." Strength was patience. Strength was love. And love, I learned, is not something that fades even when memory does. My mother lived with us for 4 more years after she returned from Samuel's home. Some days she woke with clarity, remembering stories from her childhood or singing hymns with Michael. Other days she wandered through the house, asking where her parents were, or searching for a room that didn't exist anymore. There were difficult moments, moments when she didn't recognize me, when she cried in confusion, when she felt lost in her own home. But there were also moments of tenderness I will forever keep close. The soft way she said my name when she remembered it. The way she brushed Michael's hair with her trembling fingers. The way she sometimes hummed melodies from years gone by. She left once out of fear. But she stayed the rest of her days out of love. And I held her hand through every one of them. When she passed away, it happened gently. In her sleep, on a warm spring morning, with sunlight filling her room. Her breathing slowed, her hands relaxed, and she slipped away as softly as a whisper. I sat beside her for a long time, holding the hand that once wiped my tears, cooked my meals, braided my hair, and protected me from storms both real and emotional. She had been my guardian. And in the end, I had been hers. There was no grand goodbye, no final speech, no dramatic moment. Just the quiet truth that she had lived. She had loved. And she had been loved in return. And that was enough. After her passing, I found the old wooden box again, the one she had hidden long before she disappeared. Inside were the same letters, the same locket, the same pieces of her past she tried to protect. But this time, I read every letter without pain. I read them with understanding. I realized that life is not a straight line. It twists. It turns. It carries us through moments of joy and moments of fear. It shows us love in different shapes, some we cling to, others we hide away. My mother's memories of Samuel were not a betrayal. They were part of her story. A story she wasn't ready to share until her mind began slipping. A story that made her feel safe when the world inside her head grew confusing. I placed the letters back in the box and kept the locket for myself. Not as a reminder of what she hid, but as a reminder of who she was. A woman with dreams, with heartbreaks, with a life far bigger than the one I knew. We forget sometimes that our parents had entire worlds before we were born. Michael grew up remembering her with kindness. He still talks about her gentle laugh, the way she hummed songs, the way she always held his little hands so carefully. Even as an adult, he carries her lessons with him. He became a man of quiet strength, the kind of man who treats others with compassion simply because he grew up watching it at home. And Thomas? Well, we grew older together. We learned to support each other in ways we hadn't known when we were young. Grief taught us closeness. Responsibility taught us tenderness. Losing my mother taught us that life is too short not to love gently. Now, as an elderly woman myself, I often sit on the same porch where my mother once sat. Looking out at the evening sky, listening to the quiet sounds of the neighborhood. Sometimes I talk to her in my heart. "Mom, I hope you found peace," I whisper. "I hope you knew how much you were loved, even when you forgot." And in the softness of the evening breeze, I imagine her whispering back. "I did, Mary. Always. If there is one lesson my life has taught me, it is this. Love is not about holding on tightly. Love is about showing up, again and again. Even when someone forgets. Even when someone leaves. Even when someone changes. Love remains. It lives in the quiet moments. In forgiveness. In patience. In staying when it would be easier to walk away. My mother may have left home once. But she never left my heart. Not for a moment. And now, as I tell this story all these years later, I do so with a heart full of gratitude. For the time I had with her. For the memories we shared. For the love that shaped me into the woman I am today. She taught me that life is fragile. That memory is delicate. That compassion is powerful. And that forgiveness is not a gift we give others, but a gift we give ourselves. And if I close my eyes long enough, I can still hear her voice. Soft and warm. Saying, "Never forget who you are, Mary. And never blame yourself for the choices others make." Those words guide me still. And they always will.